Kristine Hubbard is the operation manager for BECK Taxi. She's a third-generation taxi industry professional, working her way up the ladder. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I do work for the Toronto Taxi Alliance. Kristine, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, thank you.
You have a really interesting background in the taxi industry. You're part of a third generation. How did you and your family get started in the taxi industry?
BECK Taxi is almost 50 years old actually, and it was a small fleet of 25 taxis operated by my grandfather, Jim Beck, part of another company that was operating in the city, and he just felt like he could do a better job and decided to start in the East End. We were a beaches company and we've grown from there.
And you've started, coming into the office when you were a little girl and started doing different tasks and working your way literally up the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. There isn't a job, I don't think, in that office that I can't do. Certainly, I really looked forward to working there. It becomes part of you. The people who work there become part of your family. As you grow up in an office setting like that and getting to know the drivers and everyone else, it's hard to leave. Now,
taxi have made news for the last year and a half in Toronto. Obviously, it's no secret that it's all about the new technology. I don't know if I want to name that company that's trying to move in, but what's the real issue here as far as consumers? What should they be aware of when they look at taking an alternative method versus a traditional taxi?
Well, I'd say the first misconception, I think, is that there is anything other than taxi service being talked about. There is this desire to redefine the word ride sharing, which is not at all what these so-called bandit cabs, as they've been known in the industry. They're offering a taxi service, and I think that's the first misconception. The second is that that they're offering a safe product, which of course they aren't. It's uninsured. They are in fact operating illegally, as are the drivers providing the service, who in fact are probably the most at risk.
And so if somebody were to use one of these ride-hailing apps that have become ubiquitous and around town, what are they getting in return for that?
What they're getting potentially, absolutely, is, first of all, the platform itself is not licensed and so does not follow the requirements of the City of Toronto, at least. I don't think they're operating legally anywhere in Canada, actually. But what they're getting is a person in their private vehicle willing to carry paying passengers, and they're not insured to provide that service.
You offer, for those people who have disabilities, the option of ordering a taxi that can accommodate their needs.
Absolutely. So BECK Taxi does have probably the largest on-demand fleet of wheelchair-accessible vehicles in the city.
And that's not something that you can get with one of those ride-hailing apps.
Right, exactly. So you're unable to reach that service. So we obviously see problems there. They are, the fact that they would discriminatorily, provide service to people only who don't need wheelchair-accessible vehicles. I mean, that is one among many, many problems that we see with it.
And you've been making this case at City Hall over the last several months. How is that going?
Well, I do think that we have the support of most of council on this. And we heard at last council meeting that dealt with our issue over and over and over from councillors their concern about this unlawful company that has made a conscious decision to ignore very important rules and regulations that have been created by City Hall for the purpose of public safety and consumer protection.
And where is it sitting right now? There was a meeting, the mayor asked for a report, and the report is being prepared.
Right. So there is a report being prepared on different ways in which companies would be able to enter the market legally. But what it is to provide is equal regulation for all ground transportation. And I think what that first does is acknowledges the fact that we're all offering taxi service. If those rules are going to change, we'll see what those changes are in the spring, in May is what we're told. At the same time, though, the work has been done bringing these ride-hailing apps into existing regulations. So right now, the idea that they're operating outside of the law is false. They're actually operating illegally and have acknowledged that they're doing so.
I recall last summer that the city went to court to try and get an injunction, but were struck down on a technicality. And then City Council has since amended the bylaw to correct that problem. What have they done since then?
So this is the question. We did see that Toronto was unsuccessful in its injunction, and it was just that, a technicality in the bylaw, which has now been updated and enacted as of November the 1st. So the question is now, if the city was of the position that these companies should stop operating unless they're following the law. We see that they've been given time to comply. The expectation then is that they would file that injunction again because they are not in compliance.
Kristine, there's been a lot of issues around the legality of some of these ride-sharing apps, and some people feel that they're fine and there's no problem to use them. Have you conducted any research to find out what people's attitudes are on them?
I think, yes, we have. And I think that what we're hearing is that people are suggesting, well, I have my councillors and the mayor, they make the rules. And certainly if this was a risk or if I was in danger, they would put a stop to it. So these are the concerning things that we're hearing. Why would our city continue to allow them to continue knowing they're operating illegally and putting people at risk? There are safety concerns, and they should communicate those very clearly.
And there's another aspect is that, do any of these ride-sharing apps pay taxes or fees to the city?
So that's a great question. No. So not only are they not paying any fees to the city, where taxi drivers, legal licensed taxi drivers, I think the city collects about close to $10 million a year from them for regulation. And no, we're understanding that people using the ride-sharing apps are not paying tax, and that the drivers providing the service are also not claiming income tax and do not have HST numbers. And
just as a comparison point, how much HST did you pay in the last year?
Well, with BECK Taxi, we contribute probably $100,000 a month for HST. So yes, a significant amount of money that, if these ride-hailing apps, if their data is true or if the numbers are true, there is a lot of money being lost from our federal government.
So $1.2 million from just one taxi firm in the city alone.
That's right.
Annually versus zero on the other side.
Right, and that doesn't include even the what the drivers are claiming when they complete their income tax forms at the end of the year.
Astounding. One of the criticisms that I hear about the existing taxi industry, and I think we need to clarify that BECK actually doesn't own any taxis. Is that correct?
That's right. So that is a misconception. BECK Taxi does not own taxis in the City of Toronto. We own a brand and a dispatch and call center or technology, again, to connect riders with drivers. So we work within the existing bylaw and expect that all drivers and all vehicles that we are dispatching to are also following those rules.
Now, getting back to the issue is that a lot of complaints have been leveled at the current system, that the taxis are not well maintained and cleaned, and that that there's issues in terms of rider service. How is BECK and other companies responding to those concerns?
Well, BECK has always had a very high expectation for cleanliness of a vehicle and maintenance, of course. The City of Toronto does inspect vehicles twice a year to ensure that they are mechanically sound, and we do inspections above and beyond that. And I think that's where the competition exists. The idea that we haven't been competing for customers all these years is false. You know, for BECK Taxi, we have those expectations for clean cars, courteous service, professional drivers. All of the things that we get in terms of feedback from the public are addressed immediately because, again, it's the BECK Taxi name on top of all of those cars. It's important that we're living up to our high service standards.
It's your family name. Just out of curiosity, how many rides do you dispatch annually?
So last year was the busiest year in the history of BECK Taxi, and we dispatched 8.5 million rides through, again, the various forms of contact, our app, the web, and telephone service.
That's an astonishing number when you break it down.
It is. It's, you know, it's something we're really proud of, and, you know, the people that we are providing this service to, you know, which includes the drivers. I mean, we have to ensure that we're doing a good enough job for them so that they'll stay and support the BECK brand.
And we're getting into that busy holiday season, and winter is going to be upon us in due course. And, you know, that usually means it's a busy time for taxi firms like yourself. And what, you know, I hate to kind of dwell on the criticisms, but it's hard to sometimes get a taxi at that time, and that's why some of these ride-sharing apps have found popularity.
I think, you know, there are a couple of things to be said about that. When it comes to the ride-hailing apps, what you often will get is either, you know, 5 times surge pricing. So if you're looking to pay $500 to get home.
Explain that, because not everyone is familiar what this surge pricing means.
So I can use Halloween as the most recent example. I think we heard stories about, you know, young people getting home from the city, whether it was to Brampton or another to Woodbridge, they paid upwards of $700. And the idea that we would hijack or hold people to, you know, either pay us exorbitant amounts of money or you're going to be stranded, I mean, obviously wouldn't be an option for us. When people need us, that's when we want to be there for them. The other, you know, alternatively, you might get the message, sorry, there are none available, which is just not something you're ever going to get when you're ordering a BECK Taxi. You know, it may take longer, but we'll never forget about you, and we'll never tell you that we're not coming.
And just for the record, you're not allowed to do surge pricing.
No. So in the taxi industry, when you do follow the rules, part of those regulations is, you know, price protection, and so that the consumer knows how much they're going to pay. It is a safety issue too between drivers and riders to ensure that drivers are being paid fairly and that customers are being charged a fair price. So I really do believe in the regulation of the meter rate, and again, to ensure that drivers can make a living and that people aren't being gouged when they need us the most.
Kristine, thank you so much for joining us today.